So this is going to be a really special episode for me because I'm at a really interesting point in my life right now. I'm kind of starting a new chapter because I have officially quit my really draining corporate job and it feels amazing. Plus, in a couple of days, I'm leaving for almost a full month of traveling, which is something I've never done before. So it's all really new to me, really exciting. And in general, I'm aiming for a long episode this time where I discuss all of my projects in detail. So let's just get into it. And as always, if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing so you don't miss my future videos. So one of the hobbies I usually revisit around summertime is, of course, sewing. And although I'm doing it for fun and it's not as much of a serious business for me as knitting, I would still like to improve and grow when I practice sewing. And thankfully, the sponsor of today's video, Craftsy, is always ready to help me with that. Craftsy is an amazing online community for creative people of all skill levels and all interests, with over 2,000 classes in the library in more than 20 different categories. The topics range from knitting, sewing, crochet, and other fiber arts to baking, cooking, gardening, woodworking, and painting, so there's just so much to explore with Craftsy. One of my favorite teachers on Craftsy is Ashley Hugh, who is the instructor behind so many wonderful classes on sewing, quilting, English paper piecing, and upcycling. I've been really loving Ashley's class called Advance Your Sewing Skills, which covers different techniques that can help you really up your sewing and finishing game. And this class was perfect for an adventurous beginner like me, who is also kind of a perfectionist at heart. Ashley goes into detail about topics like hemmings, darts, pleats, and neat finishings, so anything you would need to really elevate your project. Craftsy classes are always a joy to watch and learn from, and all of them are taught by professionals whose only goal is to make sure that you learn and grow in your craft and have fun along the way. Classes also regularly include downloadable content to help you understand the material better and practice your skills. So if you want to join Craftsy, the first 1,000 people watching this video to scan the QR code or use my link in the description will get a full year of Craftsy Premium membership for just $1.49. And this offer will include access to every single class in Craftsy's library for a full year, but it is valid for new members only, so please make sure you scan the QR code on the screen or check the link in the description. And thank you so much to Craftsy for sponsoring today's video. So let's jump into my finished objects, and the first one is my finished Isla Shawl, which I have since found out is not pronounced Isla, and I am mortified because I was so confident in the last episode saying like Isla, Isla, Isla over and over. But in my defense, I'm a native Ukrainian speaker who was looking at a pattern from a French company, and I just didn't, assume that it's a Scottish word that is pronounced with the S being silent. And also I have since tried to deduce why I said Isla, and I realized it's because there is a classic American Dad episode that takes place on an Isla island, and that's why I said it, so don't laugh at me. But regardless of what this pattern is called, I really love this finished object and I'm so happy I made it. It's one of those designs where I'm really mad at myself for not trying it sooner, because I've seen it everywhere but just wasn't into it, I guess, and it was a mistake. I should have made it sooner because I love it so much, and I love this vintage feel it has because of the color scheme, I guess. And I have been seeing a lot more color combos that include some kind of brown or dark purple with blue or light blue, and I've been feeling it even though I'm honestly not a fan of blue. This pattern is super fun to knit. It's really potato chippy, and despite being so colorful and textured, it doesn't actually have any color work. It's just stripes with slip stitches. It's very rhythmic and potato chippy. You kind of can't put it down because you're always trying to get to the next stripe or to the next full pattern repeat. It just grows so quickly. As you can probably tell, mine is a lot larger than the pattern intends, and it's because I think I've made 7 repeats instead of 4 proposed in the pattern, because I wanted it to be larger and have it be useful both in a warmer season to just wear over your shoulders and to be used as a shawl, a proper shawl in winter as well. And I feel this is exactly exactly what I got with this particular shape. And the only thing I was kind of concerned about is that since it has a really rapid increase on this outer edge, it curls on its own and it tries to create this heart shape with the corners. I tried my best to really block it out, which I think worked. So I guess my only recommendation if you're knitting this is that if you don't want this curve to be super dramatic, you will need to probably pin block it in a really straight line. When it comes to triangular shawls, I really prefer the ones with a wider wingspan and a shorter or narrower body, because I feel like they're much easier to tie and they don't bunch up at the back of the neck as much. So the shape of this one is exactly what I was looking for, and as I said before, I don't think this is my last Isla Shawl because it's great for stash busting or trying out colors you haven't knit with before, or using up leftovers. And also I feel like this texture would look great in just a solid color as well. And I've used the leftovers from this big version to make another one for my cat, which is much smaller, and I'm gonna show you this diva in a second. She was purring on my lap all this time, so I have dressed her up for this, and she looks extremely miserable, mostly because she doesn't like to be picked up. She's more of a, hanging near you kind of cat, and she's not as miserable as she looks, but, she's purring, at least. Her coat is really dense, so she doesn't actually need any accessories. She doesn't need to be warmer than she already is. But yeah, I exploited my cat for an Instagram reel, and now I'm stuck with this small Isla Shawl, which I think I'm just gonna unpick and make it larger, kind of following the actual dimensions of the pattern. And I'm gonna gift it to a friend who I'm gonna be visiting in a couple of weeks. And she's probably watching this, so yeah, Anya, get ready to be twinning with me. So this design is from Bush, but I haven't actually used their recommended Le Petit lamb's wool yarn for this. I went for a different combo. My main color was Seasons from Rosarios, and I really liked working with this yarn. It's a really squishy chainette, cotton and wool blend, and I'm honestly usually not a fan of cotton wool blends because I feel like they're way too stiff because of the cotton. The best example of what I'm talking about is Duo by Sadness Garn. It's just stiff and gets stiffer every time you wash it and reblock it. I knit a t-shirt using that yarn about 3 years ago at this point, and I just stopped wearing it. But here it doesn't stiffen with blocking, it just stays really nice and kind of fluffy. So this was my main color, and my contrast blue was also from Rosarios. It's their Principe Real, and some people in my comment section said that they tried this yarn and it's really splitty when you knit with it, and I honestly haven't noticed that. I would really like to maybe make a garment out of it sometime, just to see this texture play in just a standard stockinette fabric. And I should say that I received both of these as a gift from Rosarios, kind of a little discovery set of their summer yarns, and I've really enjoyed working with them. And my brown contrast color was Cardiff Cashmere Classic, so a really odd choice with these yarns, but because, as I said, all of these are chainette and the same weight, they worked really, really well together. And while I was kind of rummaging through my stash and preparing it for a new season, I found another combo which I would really like to try and swatch for the Isla Shawl, because I feel like it might be really interesting, but I'm also fully aware that it might not work out as I imagine it. I want to try and go for a difference in texture instead of using different colors, and this is what I found in my stash. And this lighter lilac is Torino from Lamana, and it has my hair in it. Cool. This is a really unique and soft, thin boucle yarn, but to be honest, I don't know what to do with it besides trying to swatch for this shawl. I have also received it as a part of a discovery set from Lamana, and I just couldn't figure out a project for it because I only have one ball, and I also chose these two lilac yarns, which I talked about last time. This is Alpaca 2 from Isager, and this is the matching silk mohair in the same shade, but you can see it's kind of darker and more grayish, more pale. So I feel like having a standard wool and a fluffy mohair with a really interesting light boucle yarn would be really fun. So I guess I'll just let you know next time if it works or not. Next, I'd like to talk about my finished ivy blouse from Petite Knit, which I have actually turned into a baby tee, and it was the best decision because I absolutely love how it came out. I really, really love wearing it, and I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of wear out of it in the summer, even though I know that a lot of people are not fans of wearing mohair mohair against the skin, but I'm really loving it. I finished knitting this almost immediately after recording my last episode because when I was editing that podcast, I was just looking at the b-roll of me trying it on while it was still a work in progress, and I just wanted to start wearing it as soon as possible, and it genuinely filled a gap in my wardrobe that I didn't even know I had. So as I said, this pattern is the Ivy Blouse from Petite Knit and not the Ivy Tee, despite the fact that I ended up with short sleeves on my finished object. And the reason I went for the blouse version is, first of all, because I already had it in my library, and also it's designed or like recommended to be knit with 2 strands of silk mohair held together, which was exactly what I wanted to use. Plus the gauge on the blouse version is larger compared to the tee, and I had a limited yarn quantity, so I didn't want my fabric to be too dense and like increase my chances of running out of yarn. The blouse has 23 stitches in 10 centimeters and the tee has 28. I was kind of experimenting in terms of the gauge I wanted to go for, and I actually tried a swatch for the Ivy tee on 3mm needles, and in 2 strands held together it was way too dense, and in 1 strand it was a bit too see-through for my liking, so I tried a swatch on 3.75, which is, for the record, my favorite needle size. I don't know what it is about it, but it's so like superior to 3.5 and 4mm needles. If I could, I would knit anything on just 3.75, but regardless, that swatch worked, so I cast on the Ivy blouse, and I was considering maybe if I have enough yarn at the end to knit the long-sleeved version as the pattern intends, but I was really not enjoying that project since I have been working on it for so long, and it was really a slog most of the time. I wanted the satisfaction of just ticking something off my list when it comes to this project, so I knit 2 super short kind of placeholder sleeves and continued with the body, but then the more I tried it on, the more I liked it, and now I can confidently say that these are not placeholder sleeves, and it was a deliberate decision because I actually have quite a lot of yarn left over. It's almost a full ball, but I don't want to add long sleeves to it, even though I can. I instead would probably cast on another pattern from like the Ivy family over the summer, and I just really like how it's constructed. This is such a simple minimalist design which doesn't have any ribbing, doesn't have any finishing. It's exclusively stockinette with rolled edges, but because of the mock saddle shoulders, which you knit seamlessly here, the fit is just tailored. It looks really crisp and just really flattering. I feel like the Ivy patterns are really similar to the plain yoke patterns from La Knit, not in terms of the design and construction, but in terms of concept. Both are really applicable to different yarns, different gauges, and can look great in both a short-sleeved version and a long-sleeved version, and of course both are stockinette with minimal positive ease. I usually don't like and find it kind of eyebrow raising when designers release basically the same design as different patterns you can buy separately, but on this occasion I honestly don't mind it. I feel like it might be really useful for beginners because when you're just a beginner and you don't really have a lot of experience with understanding which gauge you should go for or which yarn you should use or how to substitute yarns in patterns, it's really convenient to be able to just browse through 5 different options and select the one that suits your needs and the project you're going for. And I guess we have to admit that one of the main appeals of Petite Knit patterns is that they're so beginner friendly and so digestible in terms of their instruction and kind of simplicity. But of course, once knitters get more practice, they usually become a bit more knowledgeable in terms of yarn substitutions and modifications, changing gauge in the patterns they're knitting. So I don't know, I feel like it is quite useful for beginners, but when I see a pattern that has 2 versions sold separately, and one is for a long-sleeved version and another one is for a short-sleeved version in a summer yarn, I find it a little bit funny, but I don't know, I'd like to know your thoughts on this. So going back to my Ivy blouse slash baby tee, I think this is the only project I've ever done with a boat neck. So this is my first ever boat neck and I really like how it looks, but my only tiny issue with it is that since this fabric is so lightweight, when I just, wear it on its own, it's fine. But if I put a jacket or a shirt, the fabric just starts to move around and bunches in a weird way. But it's also probably because I have a bit of a crooked back and one of my shoulders is lower than the other. So yeah, we're not going to open that kind of worms, but I actually really like that it's so lightweight, and I like just the fabric that Mohair creates. There is just nothing like it, and this combination of the drape and luster from the silk with a really slight puffy halo from the Mohair is so unique and beautiful. And of course, we're more familiar with it as knitters, but I also feel like this is the fabric you rarely see in store-bought knitwear. So when people see it, they find it to be really intriguing. At least that's the feedback I got when I started wearing this just around, and my friends saw this t-shirt. I received honestly a lot of compliments, mostly because they were just really curious about this fabric and why is it silky and fluffy at the same time. So I just had a lot of fun explaining silk mohair to people. I think part of its appeal and like intrigue it causes in people is because of the color. This color is objectively really beautiful. I was afraid that it's going to be a bit too cool toned for me, but it's really not. It looks beautiful, and I also really like the luster in this specific mohair because, as I said probably a couple of times already, the Lamana Premia has more silk than other mohairs I've used, so it's a bit more shiny than regular silk mohair. So for example, this is the Isager silk mohair, and I know it probably might not be the most fair comparison because it's spun into a ball differently, but I feel like you can tell that this one is a bit more shiny and lustery, and this one is much more fluffy. So this is kind of embarrassing, but I have two finished accessories which I haven't introduced in the last episode, and I usually don't like to do that. I really try to take my time with my knits and make sure I document my progress and my feedback along the way, but this time it was mostly stress knitting because my last couple of weeks at my corporate job before I left for good were really stressful and really hectic. I was really tired in the evenings and wanted to knit on something, but once my Isla Shawl was done, the only other whip I had was a cursed project, which I'm gonna discuss later, but it was not something I could just pick up and continue knitting. I also completely forgot that I have a shawl project that I could work on, so I just started casting on stuff to keep my hands occupied, and that's how I ended up with these two projects. So I've knit a Sophie Scarf and the holly bandana, and I really wanted to cast on another holly bandana after I mentioned it in the roundup I did a couple of weeks ago, because I knit this I think in September and I didn't get to keep it. It was a gift knit. I liked that pattern very much and wanted to cast on another one. I also suddenly found myself in need of a bandana, and I'm not a regular like bandana wearer. I don't think I ever actually wore a bandana out in public. I wore a couple of like silk scarves, kind of similar to like you would wear a bandana, but I felt uncomfortable most of the time because I felt like people could tell that it's not something I do regularly and I don't feel like confident wearing it. Regardless, I really need a bandana now because I am going to Rome in a couple of days. That's where my kind of journey starts, and I'm really looking forward to it. Rome is one of my favorite places on earth. I just love this city so much. I just want to like kiss it. But the thing is, the last time I went to Rome, I was there in July and it was like 45 degrees. So I just burned my scalp. Now I was like, I'm going to Rome, so I would need a bandana. So initially I wanted to use a different yarn for this, but right around the time when I was planning this project, I received a package from Pascuali, who I have connected with at HH Cologne, and it was one of those brands where I was really impressed with their selection because I haven't really seen it before the fair, and now I have some of their yarns to try out. And one of the yarns they sent me to try was Arctic Pearl, which is one of the most unique yarns I've ever like tried in terms of composition. It's made entirely out of seaweed. It's really similar to viscose or lyocell, which is the eco-friendly version of viscose, but this one is called sea cell. So the actual pulp from which the fibers are made is derived from seaweed, which is really interesting. And I love how this project came out. It's exactly what I needed for my trip, and I kind of specifically chose this bottle green color to remind me of the fact that it's seaweed, you know? So this holly bandana is actually modified. I knit one more like clover lace repeat before switching to the border, just because I was afraid that it's going to be a bit too short, which was my issue with the first holly bandana I made. It was a bit too little fabric to like tie it securely, I had to go back and pick my I-cord edge and add more length to it or like more width to it. So I wanted to avoid it this time and added one more repeat. But I also mentioned in my roundup where I talked about this pattern that it has an applied I-cord edge, which seems to me like a waste of time, and it's probably done there to not have this outer edge be too tight compared to the rest of the fabric. But the way I did it is I knit the I-cord edge simultaneously and increased with a yarn over instead of the make increase, and I go into detail about how I did it in the roundup, so check out that video if you're interested. And because I've knit this pattern before, I recalled the pattern repeat almost immediately. I didn't have to look at it, I didn't have to think about it. It was just a really pleasant knit. I'm so grateful that I cast it on, and I really enjoyed knitting with this yarn. It's really just easy to knit with. It's not too slippery, plus it's in a chainette as well, so it doesn't split when you knit with it. And also it's really cool to the touch. It just has a really nice like cooling feeling to it, kind of like some linen yarns. And as usual with my finished objects, I have a tiny gripe with this project, and in this case the gripe is that this bandana came out a little bit too drapey for me. I know it's probably because of the C-cell, which is similar to viscose. It's also not supposed to be a super dense pattern in general, but my gauge is the same as the pattern suggests, and my previous bandana was a bit denser. It still was drapey because I knit it in barrette silk, but it didn't have like as much of a flowiness to it. So what I might do is just starch it a little bit, something to give it like extra structure so it holds on my head a little bit more securely. And yeah, hopefully this finished object will turn me into a frequent bandana wearer, especially since now I have bangs, so it's kind of easier to, style it, but we'll see. So in an unprecedented move, I'm changing my camera angle to continue filming because the sun was really trying to get me, and it will probably follow me around, but hopefully I will be done by then and actually go out and enjoy the sunlight instead of being annoyed with it. But anyway, another yarn from Pascuali I got to try was their iconic 628 cashmere, and it's really good. It's super soft. It's 100% cashmere, so of course it's going to be good, and it's, pretty pricey, but I feel like for a small accessory or a very special like heirloom type project, it's probably worth it. So I'm just really glad I got a chance to work with this yarn, and they sent me 2 balls to knit, one Sophie Scarf, but my stingy ass decided that I would make 2 Sophie scarves with, 1 ball in each, and 1 ball of this yarn has 112 meters in it. So I have knit the first Sophie scarf using just 1 ball of this yarn, even less if I remember correctly, and it was way too wide to also be long enough to tie around my neck at least twice, and I guess I got carried away with my increases and didn't want it to be too thin, so it didn't work out in the end, and I decided that this was a lesson about stinginess, and I frogged half of my progress and added more length, even though I knew that this would mean that I would have to introduce the second ball into this project, but I like it a lot more now. I think it's the perfect length. In total, I used 30 grams to knit this, and it's long enough to comfortably and like loosely tie it around my neck 3 times, which is exactly what I wanted. I wanted it to be really comfortable and also to be able to tie it without having to look in the mirror. And I think the fact that I had to frog half of this scarf was also a bonus in terms of me knowing now that this yarn can be frogged even after blocking, and it can be, reknit again. When I was knitting it initially, like after frogging and like starting to knit with frogged yarn, it looked a little bit iffy compared to the original fabric, but with blocking everything evened out, and I don't think you can really tell which side was frogged and reknit and which side was the original one. And one more thing I'd like to mention about this yarn is that it's actually a lot more like fluffier and bloom prone than Cardiff Cashmere Classic, which is more smooth. So I guess it depends on your preference. I, for example, think I prefer this one because sometimes when I knit something in cashmere, which is not really often, I block it at least twice to make sure that I really get out all of the blooming out of it and it's as fluffy as I like it to be. But with this cashmere, blocking it once is enough to really make it bloom and like make the cashmere pop. So I think I prefer it. And since I have 20 grams of this left, I would still be able to make a scarf for my mom, like a matching Sophie scarf, which is the reason I actually wanted to make two identical ones. I'm actually gonna see my mom soon. She lives in Italy, and since I'm going to Rome for a couple of days after I'm done with all of my tours, I'm gonna go visit her in Umbria, and it's also gonna be my birthday, so I feel like it would be really fun to make two matching Sophie scarves to wear on my like birthday outing. So I just hope it's gonna be as fun as I imagine. As I said, the sun is actively chasing me, so I had to adjust the camera angle again, but now is the time for us to talk about my cursed work in progress, which is, as you might have guessed, probably my Norma sweater. This is going to be a bit of an unboxing because I haven't touched this project in 2 weeks. It's just been sitting in this project bag of shame, which is actually a really beautiful project bag that my friend has sent me. So I'm gonna link her store in the description, but I hate this project so much. I would have frogged it, but I also know that it's gonna be beautiful once I finish it. So I really have to power through it. But anyway, there's some yarn in here, and I'm not gonna get into the yarn combo I used for this because this is a really elaborate yarn combo which I discussed in detail in the previous episode, and I also have it listed in my Ravelry project page for this project. But anyway, I'm just gonna pull out all of the yarns I don't need. Let's see. So this is the state of my Norma sweater. Where do we even start? I knit about half the body length and one of the sleeves, and then I realized that it's coming out much too wide and I won't have enough yarn to finish all the stripes, so I frogged back half of my progress back to when I was splitting it for body and sleeves and split it a bit sooner. And I sincerely hoped at the time that this would fix the issue with the sleeves, but unfortunately no. Even though they are now smaller in terms of stitch count, they are still ridiculously too wide on me. And because they're not really tapered or like decreased towards the cuff here, there are some decreases, but mostly to just adjust the stitch count a little bit towards the cuff. This fabric right here really bunches at my back and creates a lot of like extra bulk, which I don't really want or need. So as I mentioned last time, I suspect that part of the issue with it being so bulky is that my yarn combo is not the same as the recommended yarn combo, which is a bit more lightweight and drapey because I'm using wool here and I don't have silk mohair in the mix except for this brown stripe where I mostly used it for just marling effect. And I just don't think I have it in me to frog it back to the raglan again, and I really don't know what to do. I feel like I might just finish one of the sleeves and see how it looks and maybe do another mid-project block. But doing any kind of frogging on this project is extremely annoying because it means that I end up with tiny balls of yarn for each of the colors because of course it's striped, and I'm kind of playing yarn chicken with the blue yarn here. Zero positive vibes with this project at the moment, and I have actually switched to knitting the sleeves after running into an issue on the body here, specifically on the ribbing, because I wanted to mimic this really crisp, quite tight 1x1 ribbing, which I did on the neckline. I switched my needle size from the recommended 4mm, I think, for the ribbing to 3mm, and it's super crisp, super tight. I really like how it looks now, and it's already blocked. I basically did a mid block on this project to check if the neckline is not too tight, and it isn't. Like anything up to the raglan split is beautiful. Anyway, I tried to do the same crisp ribbing on smaller needles than recommended on the hem here, and I couldn't just pick up 3mm needles and start knitting the ribbing because it would have meant that my rib is really tight and like scrunched up compared to the body, and I didn't want to have this like balloon effect. So usually when I want to use a smaller needle size for the ribbing than recommended, I increase my stitch count evenly. So I do increases every like 8th stitch or every 10th stitch depending on how much further down I go in terms of needle size. So I've done this here and I finished the ribbing, but it was still really stiff and something was off about it. So I unraveled it and tried again by increasing more stitches. I increased every 4th stitch, so it was a lot of extra stitches to knit in the ribbing, but I knit about 10 rounds before I realized that it still looks off, and my main issue with it was that it was just too stiff. It didn't work as well as it did on the neckline. So at that point, I spent about 3 days knitting this ribbing with zero result, and I decided to pivot to a wide rib similar to the new Norma pattern. But since I'm apparently a knitting genius who is so busy, I couldn't spare like 30 seconds of my time to look up the new Norma pattern and zoom into the image to actually check what kind of ribbing it was and like count the individual stitches. I made it up in my head instead, and I knit 4x2 ribbing, which I hate how this looks. It still curls up because of the stockinette, and I feel like I should have knit 1 purl stitch instead of 2 in between the knit stitches. And at that point, I could also just see that the body itself was way too short, even with the ribbing, so I would probably have to frog it again, add more length. And that's exactly why I switched to knitting the sleeves. I wanted to, first of all, just knit normally for a while and take a break from that ribbing situation, but also I wanted to, once I reach the cuff, experiment, because of course the circumference is much smaller, but I didn't get to that part. Like, look at this tangling here. It's so stupid. It's too wide. It's really, really wide, and I feel like before I commit to frogging this whole thing back to the raglan, I might try and knit tapered sleeves, so start like really rapid decreases right from the very start. I have no idea if it's gonna work out or not, and part of me just really wants to set this project on fire. But before I do that, you see, like, part of it is that I have this creeping realization that the issue is in the raglan distribution itself. I've read some feedback about this pattern specifically, and my favorite things knitwear patterns in general, and a lot of people report that the sleeves are usually too wide, and I don't want to frog it all the way back. Like, I don't want to undo this project, you know. And I have the key cardigan pattern from Petite Knit in my library, which, if I'm not mistaken, has a really similar or almost identical gauge to the Norma Sweater. It has the same raglan construction, and it's also striped, so these patterns are basically cousins. But I really want to see what the stitch count is for my size for the sleeve. What is the actual raglan distribution? And even if I have to frog back to the raglan again, I might just follow the instructions for the key cardigan and adjust my stitch count a little bit to make it less wide in the sleeves. There's also a huge chance that I might just let this project hibernate until fall, because I don't want to deal with it right now. I'm leaving for almost a month, so I'm definitely not taking this with me, and I feel like this is a UFO. Like, you have just witnessed an arrival of a UFO in real time, and I don't know. I'm kind of hesitant to really say anything negative about the pattern, because I know that a lot of these issues I'm having are my issues, again, because of my yarn choice, because of my kind of experimenting with this pattern, but I feel like it shouldn't be that hard. So yeah, this project is the reason why I stuck to accessories in May and haven't actually cast on anything major. I just wanted some instant gratification for a change, and even if I had to frog something like it was with the Sophie Scarf, it was still super manageable, because it took me like 20 minutes to frog and then one evening to reknit what I've lost. So I'm sorry that this segment was so emotional, but it's probably because I don't think I've ever been so emotional about a project and had such a drastic drop between enjoying the project and wanting to set it on fire. But thankfully, I have been really enjoying my 2 other works in progress, and both of them are coming with me to Rome and beyond. The first one is my Jakobe shawl, which you have seen last time, and to be honest, I don't have anything to say about it. I have been working on it, and I've done a couple more repeats since you last saw it. The only thing of note I've done with this project is gave it a little steam block just to check how the stitch pattern is coming out, and I really love it. I really like this color combo, or more of a texture combo, because I would say that these colors are super similar, and this mohair turned out to be variegated. I feel like you could say variegated for this, so it has some rust, some brown, some beige, some gray in it. And hands down, the coolest thing about this project is the yarn I'm using for the garter section, which is Polwarth wool from Tarndie, and this is the yarn that was gifted to me by my friend Erica all the way from Australia. It's the coolest yarn I own, I guess, and it is extremely soft to knit with. It's super buttery and silky despite being wool. I feel like the best way for me to describe how it is to knit with this yarn is that it really glides on the needles. And the Jakobe Shawl, which I hope is pronounced Jakobe, is a free pattern which I highly recommend. It's really well written and easy to follow. In my case, this is the first time I'm knitting this kind of construction with a really sharp angle on one side and no increases or rather a decrease on the other, and I'm not really like rushing this project. I'm just enjoying it slowly, and of course it's mindless when I'm knitting the garter portion, but I have to pay some attention when I'm knitting the eyelet motif because honestly, in terms of like reading the chart, I really don't like these eyelet and decrease motifs. It might be a bit hard to visualize if you haven't knit this sort of eyelet motif before, but the problem with it here is that your stitches, like the actual stitches, for example, knitted together or yarn over in the chart, are not aligned with the way they are in the actual fabric. You do a lot of increases in one row and then a lot of decreases in the other, and it just constantly like grows like this, and it gets quite confusing for me. I hope I'm not the only one who experiences that, but this is absolutely not the issue of the Jakobe Shawl. It's just the nature of this kind of eyelet motif, and in general, again, I really recommend this pattern, and I feel it has a lot of potential in terms of different yarn combos you can use, and you can make stripes in different colors. I sincerely hope that I won't curse my last work in progress for today by saying that I've been enjoying it a lot, and I'm really glad that I finally cast this on, because this has been in my mental queue and actual queue. So if you've been here a while, you might remember my summer knitting plans from last year, where I said I would really like to cast on a vintage blouse. This pattern doesn't have a fancy name, it's just called Lace and Ferrule Blouse by Patterns and Baldwins, and it's the pattern from the 1940s. And I saw this pattern years ago on Retro Claude YouTube channel, and she actually sells this pattern as a PDF pattern in her Ko-fi page, so please support her. I'm gonna link her Ko-fi page below. And I fell in love with this pattern because it has both lace, cables, and a ferrule colorwork yoke motif. For a 1940s pattern, this one is quite detailed, even though it still has a lot of this like knit in the same manner or continue in pattern while decreasing stuff. It still is really detailed in terms of the gauge it asks you for, and it also has a chart for the color work, which is usually unheard of in this time period because they provide you written instructions for the color work. So, you know, 3 blue, 1 black, 2 white, 3 blue, and things like that. So it's not really a fun time to sit through, but here it's quite easy to understand. And also there is a Ravelry user whose name escapes me at the moment, but I'll put it on the screen. They have very detailed notes or like detailed charts that they made from this pattern, and without them it would have been so much harder for me to understand the lace pattern for this knit. And last year I picked out alpaca silk from Sadness Garn to knit this with. And big reveal, I actually cast this on in January, and I have been slowly making some progress on the ribbing on the body, but I'm not going to be using this yarn for this knit, and this is something I'm going to frog, and I'm just showing you now for like posterity that I have been working on it, and I have been knitting this endless rib on 2mm needles, but I don't really like this yarn, if I'm being honest. It's really soft and like silky, nice to knit with, but at the same time it has awful stitch definition for some reason. And usually this doesn't bother me because I take great care in blocking my knits, but here, since it's knit flat and seamed up, you don't have this bonus of your ribbing or your stitches being smooth because they're knit in the round and you're not purling them. I hope you can see what I mean if I hold it up close like this, but the stitch definition on this ribbing is really wonky, and I know that this is not my regular stitch definition. I know I'm better than that, but the yarn is not forgiving. It's not, unfortunately, suitable for lace or flat knitting, but it might be a bit bold of me to say that, so I just decided that I might try and find another yarn to make work for this project. So I did some investigative yarn shopping because I had this alpaca 1 from Isager in my stash, and I really liked this color, but when I tried to use it in 2 strands held together, it was fine in terms of gauge for this knit, but too drapey because this is 100% alpaca and it is ridiculously drapey and like flowy, and I wanted my jumper to have more structure, so I decided to see if there's something else in the same color and maybe also from Isager that I can use, and I stumbled upon this Isager Highland wool. It's exactly the same as the alpaca 1 yarn, but unfortunately it's a bit too thin. so the gauge matches, but the actual fabric is too see-through for my liking. And because this is a quite open design in general, I feel like with just one strand of this yarn, it would have been too delicate and more prone to holes or just catching on something. So I decided to try and make a swatch with this yarn and this yarn held together, so Alpaca 1 and Highland wool, but the gauge was too big. I made like a billion swatches, and by the time I was done, I feel like I memorized this pattern repeat by heart, and now like I can knit it with my eyes closed. So this is the swatch with just Highland wool, and it's fine. It blooms a lot after blocking, but it is still too see-through for my liking. But when I add the Alpaca 1, it's great, but it's kind of too dense and too warm. Plus the gauge is off, which is really important for a project like this. I can't just modify my gauge willy-nilly here. I genuinely didn't know what to do, but then I suddenly remembered that cone thread weight yarn is a thing, and I just went to the nearest yarn store that has cone yarn and picked up a thread weight merino that matches the color. And I'm not really sure what it is because I have like a different cone, not the original cone from this yarn, but I think it's probably Harmony Teleño. Usually they're all really similar and it doesn't really matter which brand you choose. So I have 100 grams of this, which is 1500 meters. So this was the exact color I needed, and I was really hopeful about my swatch. I was praying that it works out, and thankfully it did work out. And now I actually don't have a swatch anymore. I have a finished sleeve, which is my first part of this finished design, and of course, as I said, it's knit in pieces and seamed up, which actually makes it really portable and really easy to knit on the go. I love it so far. I don't know how long it's going to take me to knit this. Of course, the hardest part of this project would be towards the end once I start knitting the Fair Isle collar, or yoke as they call it, and I'm dreading that, but at the same time I'm really excited to try it, and I already have my colors picked out. I'm gonna stick with my original color combo I selected for the Fair Isle yoke. As you can see, this is not knitting wool, this is DMC embroidery wool. I decided to use embroidery wool here because I didn't want to buy 5 different balls of yarn to only use like 30 meters of each, and I went for this subtle kind of porcelain color scheme with some brown and black mixed in. So I'm not gonna swatch this just because I don't want to run out of my like precious meterage of embroidery wool, but I'm hoping it's gonna be really beautiful. And so far I'm really enjoying this, mostly because I have memorized the pattern repeat, and because the stitches are so small, I don't have to use a cable needle here, which makes it really fast to go through all of the cables. And of course I'm knitting really fast now because the sleeve is quite small, but I also feel like this was one of my mistakes when it comes to this project, to start with the body ribbing initially, or like the front ribbing, because you have to knit 8 inches of 2x2 ribbing on thin needles, which if you're doing it right from the very start kind of takes away the joy from the project, or at least it took it away from me at the time. So I'm much more happy with seeing so much progress on the sleeve. And I have to say that the Highland wool is quite scratchy, but mostly because I kind of lost my tolerance for scratchy wool after trying the Como Grande from Lamana and Premia from Lamana, and of course the Pascuali Cashmere. So working with something that is more not even rustic, but less soft in comparison has been a bit of an adjustment. But now I absolutely remember why I love toothy wool and scratchy wool. It will always have a place in my heart. When I talked about this project last year, I said that I would try and find a way to knit the ribbing in the round, both on the body and on the sleeves, and maybe graft it, because at the same time I needed my lace sections to be flat so I can block them to the shape they need to be. But I have since realized that the main reason I wanted to do that was because of my yarn choice and because of the weird stitch definition I was getting, especially when knit flat. And also I feel like by doing these modifications and like coming up with ways to graft or like knit in the round, I'm kind of depriving myself of the joy of knitting this pattern exactly as it was intended more than like 80 years ago. And I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but I just really want to experience the process of knitting a vintage pattern exactly as it was written and intended to be knit, even though I of course don't have access to the original yarn anymore, and probably nothing would make me pick up straight needles again. But wherever I can really like absorb what the pattern is saying and follow the exact instructions it's telling me to follow. I'll try to do that just to have this experience. I guess my only cop-out is that I'm using the wonderful charts provided by the Ravelry user whose name is on the screen, because I unfortunately don't remember the name, but I'm really grateful to that person because they have saved me a lot of headache when it comes to this knit. So this is the last work in progress I have for you, and I technically have some acquisitions, but honestly nothing I'm ready to talk about yet because I got more yarns from Pascuali, something I'm still trying to find a pattern for and swatch and like make a decision. And before I do, I just don't want to show it to like not spook it because I really don't want to backtrack on my plans later. So for now, honestly, my summer queue is not settled. I'm still yet to like organize my stash and figure out what I'm taking with me on the trip. And it's been a bit like too much for me, but at the same time, I'm just, you know, waking up so happy that I don't have to go to that stupid job anymore. And I finally have time to travel and rest and relax and think about videos and think about knitting. And there were a lot of reasons why I quit this job. It's mostly for health reasons, like physical health. But I don't know, I've never done anything creative full-time before. So even though I kind of dare not hope that YouTube will become my full-time job from which I will be able to fully support myself, I'd still like to give it a go. And worst comes to worst, I will just find another job closer to fall and I will just, you know, have a beautiful summer. I'm just doing it for the plot. I'm sincerely really happy right now, and I don't know, if you want to, I can do a Q&A if you want to know more, because I am reaching some round numbers both on YouTube here and on Instagram. So if by any chance you want to ask me something, I'm ready to answer your questions. But at the same time, I'm fully prepared for like 0 comments asking me any questions. So, you know, it's up to you. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. And if you like this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing. And if by any chance you want to support my channel directly or buy me a cup of coffee, I have my PayPal linked in the description. So please check that out. Unfortunately, I'll have to spend a month without my gorgeous and really shedding co-host. But regardless, we wish you happy knitting, a wonderful day ahead, and we'll see you in the next one, or I'll see you in the next one. Bye.